Bobby, Terry. First of all, thanks for coming out, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for having us.
How was the flight?
Good.
Good.
There were two of them to get here from Oklahoma. So
talking about flying in, who's from out of town here tonight? Out of the state? Who thinks they're the furthest? Come on, let's yell out some...
Saudi Arabia.
Oh. Hold on.
Winner.
Came to ELEO from out of state.
Brazil.
Seattle for ELEO. T-shirt. There you go.
Wait,
All right. All right, Bobby, Terry.
did they come from Barcelona for ELEO?
No, I don't think so.
I was gonna say that would beat Seattle, I think, but
From Barcelona?
for this,
For this conference?
All right, see me after this. I owe you a T-shirt.
A second winner.
200.
So, anyhow, guys, first of all, congratulations on 100 million downloads. I've been a big fan, so has many of us here. Not only of YouVersion, but of what you guys do over at Life Church and what do you guys do from a technology perspective. So before we get started, why don't we provide context to everyone in the audience that may not know the inception of YouVersion, and how did you get your party on board to run with that vision?
So, the whole story is a bit of an unlikely kind of journey, but it started, quite honestly, in the airport security line in Chicago in October of 2006. So I was traveling, and I had some of the other leaders from our church there that were with me. And for whatever crazy reason, I don't know why this is, but when I travel is when I generally have bigger ideas. And it just kind of, there's some correlation between it. Like we had big ideas on the way here today. And that's just kind of, anyway, so.
Altitude.
It would just take too much time, so in the security line, the question that was going through my head for whatever reason at that time was, could we be at one of those moments in history where the right conditions are there for technology to basically disrupt how we engage in the Bible, and kind of on par with how the printing press essentially disrupted that technology, disrupted the Bible in a way that for centuries now we have access to the Bible, translation, just kind of availability around the world that didn't exist prior to the invention of the printing press. And back in 2006, it was kind of on the sort of the middle or maybe even the tail end of the Web 2.0 conversation, where people are talking about the fact that we all essentially have printing presses now ourselves. We all have our own printing press. And so what would that dynamic mean in terms of Scripture? And so there in the security line, there was just an idea that came for a website that would allow people to associate any kind of media online with any portion of the Bible. And that was the original idea for YouVersion. And the name, which people ask, what does that mean? Actually, it's always fun because some people actually come and tell me what the name means. And I'm thinking, you weren't even there. You have no idea what that, you made that up. And they believe it, like they've heard it somewhere and know all about it. But the name had about 800 feet of market research, because it was basically from the security line to the gate. It was about the amount of time I invested in coming up with the name. Okay. But I'm an activator, so before I'd even gotten on the airplane, I'd already registered the domain youversion.com, along with several other names, but that was one of the names, that was kind of the key name.
Are you one of those guys that have like 1,000 domain names?
I did, yeah. I don't as much anymore, but well, actually, we do as a church. Yeah, we have a lot of names that we.
The answer to that is yes. There's a lot of them.
Yeah. So anyway, but that's the original idea was basically what most people don't realize. It was actually for a website, not for the Bible app that we have today. That came sort of later in the journey, but that's where it basically started. So if you go and look at our domain registration on the day that it was originally registered, that was the day that I was in the airport in Chicago with the idea. Your question, though, is how did we move from just an idea to how did it kind of get going? So I'm the type of entrepreneur that, first of all, I have lots of ideas. I usually have a process where I kind of self-filter ideas through like, it's hard to even really describe it, just through a set of criteria where I ask questions like Chiwa was asking about the size of the market. I kind of process and sometimes do a little bit of research on the idea. Sometimes it's just a matter of kind of picking it apart. And I usually then take it to a set of people that I trust, that have a relationship with, that are great at giving feedback and great at dissecting ideas. I immediately kind of just try to tear it apart is kind of my approach to an idea. And if it could survive that process, then usually I'm pretty quick to kind of move an idea forward to test the concept or the idea further. And in that particular case, I started there in the airport with the group that was there with me, shared the idea, here's what I'm thinking, process it. I mean, it was like a conversation on the airplane.
So you're doing user study on the airplane for your idea.
Pretty much. I mean, it's immediate. For me, it's like an immediate process. Terry was not, at the time, working with us. We were friends. We knew each other. He worked at a different church at the time, but we knew each other through just combination of different events and things where we connected, have similar interests and similar background. And so it was about a month later that I was at an event that Terry, a conference that we were both at, and began to share this same idea, along with sort of even a bigger vision of what we were doing as a church, but this was sort of one idea kind of in the mix of things. And it was through that conversation at that conference that our relationship really began to change, and Terry really caught that vision pretty immediately. So much so that he went home that night and talked to his wife, and after his excitement of talking about, his wife says, "We're going to move to Oklahoma, aren't we?" I kind of took your storyline, but that's basically, is that right? That happened that night?
You got that right, yeah.
And so it was kind of somewhat immediate response. So I'll let you kind of sort of join where you kind of came into the story.
Yeah, so very similar to what Bobby was saying, is that the idea was there, a little bit of market research, for lack of a better term, and then we kind of united around the idea, started honing it, developing it a little bit more. And again, as what Bobby mentioned, is what we know it as today is not how it started. It started as a website, and we, lack of a better term, openly, it failed. We scratched out all of the ideas, had the concept, knew the vision and the direction that what we wanted to do, and believed wholeheartedly in that. But what we launched just wasn't the catalytic change that we were hoping. And interestingly enough, as the panel said, is that it really didn't move us. We didn't even find ourselves using.
We'd force ourselves to use it because we made it.
It was like, we've got to use this, but that didn't do it. But we still believed in the greater vision and what we wanted to accomplish. It's just the avenue that we went down, and the path that we went down wasn't the right way to execute it. And so we honed that back in that day. It wasn't the iPhones weren't around, the Androids weren't around. Bobby and I were both carrying BlackBerries, and that's where that concept came. Is that what if we just changed it, kind of dumbed it down, and put it on our put it on our mobile device. And that's really the key decision that was made that changed us, and it changed that product is what engaged us. It changed how we started engaging in reading, mainly because it was where we were everywhere, and that's what kind of formulated the original concept and idea to what we kind of know today.
I think actually the key thing was not the idea for mobile. The key thing was that we recognized it wasn't working, and that we recognized it started working when we did mobile. Those, I think, were two. Yeah. It sounds simplistic, but I think a lot of times people aren't measuring very effectively the results of what they're doing, and so they'll carry some things forward too long without making any adjustments to it. And then other times you'll have momentum, it'll be working right in front of you, and you just don't actually move quick enough to sort of seize that momentum. And that's been, I think, one of the key, pretty consistent things throughout the story, is that the moment we would see it work, we'd see it work with us or with other people, we would scrap together whatever resource we had and accelerate as fast as we could on that to kind of push that forward. So it's been almost like this kind of constant trying to push momentum, ride momentum, sustain, momentum as far as good. So to kind of give the real overview of the story, started as a website, there was extreme amount of challenge in getting the website built, not the technology, but on the licensing side.
Yes.
So we discovered really quickly that people own the Bible. It's not actually free. Was the first challenge, because our vision was for it to be entirely free. The premise was that at that time, and even somewhat to even today, there's a generation of people that couldn't fathom paying 99 cents for a song that they loved. And at that time, the Bible publishing industry was asking them to pay $20 for a book they didn't understand in digital, form. And so from a missional perspective, if you really want the Bible to be something that's a part of engaging this generation in an everyday way, it was going to have to change in terms of that value proposition. Something was going to need to change. So we had to convince people that we did not know, had no relationships with, to take a product that they were profitable and had invested lots of money in developing, and we had to convince them to give it away for free. And do it legitimately. We didn't actually do it illegitimately to start with. We want to do the right thing. But that was the biggest challenge. Once we got over that with a few of the publishers, launched the website, as Terry said, didn't really work. Forced ourselves to use it. We had about 20,000 people that visited it, which seems like a lot, but it was like that momentary go check it out and not really engage, not really use it. There wasn't any kind of stickiness to how it worked. We tried the mobile version of the website. That worked, changed us. We saw traffic change, and right at that time, Apple was announcing that they were making the iPhone available as a platform to develop on. So as a side project, we had a 19-year-old on our team, may have been 18 at the time. He loved Apple, and that was the only requirement to write apps at the time, was that you loved Apple, because you didn't have any, there was no particular expertise, the experience of iOS developers or whatever. So as a side project, kind of, nights and weekends and whatever, he had another job on our staff. We worked to build this app. At the last minute, changed the name of it from YouVersion, as far as the app name, to Bible. Which makes a lot of sense now, but it was really actually a last minute, we probably ought to do that. Nobody knows what YouVersion is, but they certainly have heard of the Bible.
Day before we pushed the app to the store.
It was literally the day before. We had it. I think we had it in the store initially reserved as YouVersion, and then right before we submitted, we changed the name to Bible. And which, if you know much about App Store discovery and all that actually played out to, in a significant way.
And we've talked, data is huge, analyzing everything, watching it all. That was the day before when we changed it. The other critical thing that's happened day of. So we're ready to push to the store, and we read this post on TechCrunch about an analytics company that released a tool to be able to measure what's going on inside your app. Bobby found that, sent it to me, and it's like, absolutely, we need to add that. So hours before this pushed to the store, we threw in an analytics package, and that has played huge. That played huge into the remaining story of being able to see the data.
That's why we're sitting here talking about it.
Yeah, exactly. But was it at that point that your vision just blew up? This mobile traction, we see the numbers coming in. Now this vision, now you guys are at 100 million downloads, right? In so many languages, impacting lives every day. Was it at that point that door kind of opened up, that vision?
Yes.
It opened.
That weekend. So it launched on July 10th, 2008, which is the day the App Store launched. So it was among the first couple hundred apps that were available on iPhone. And what Terry just mentioned about that analytics package, or that analytics tool, is at that time, Apple had it was really terrible as far as the developer environment, because they were just new. They had it's brand new. Getting any kind of data about what was actually going on was impossible. And so, but this analytics package was giving us data of how many people had installed this app. We could kind of see that. So from a Thursday night when it launched to Sunday morning, we had 83,000 people install the Bible app, which in the course of 100 million doesn't seem like that many, but it actually, from our vantage point, we had no expectation of anything close to that, so it blew us away. So what was a part-time project for that 19-year-old on Friday was his full-time job on Monday, because it was like to move quickly with it.
With 1 week sprints.
With
pushing the store every week.
We're going to have an
new
update
updates.
every week to the store. It was like we got so much we got to do. We've got to make this better. It was obviously had bugs because you just couldn't hardly even test back then very effectively, and so it was just this very rapid movement.
So at that point, you guys have to expand, all right? Bigger team, bigger operation. I've been out to Oklahoma City, and these guys are no joke. Like, don't get it twisted. I went in there, and they can give us a run for our money here in Silicon Valley. That's for sure. So, at that point, you guys expanded. Now, today, how big is your team? How does that work in terms of leading that vision forward? Because I was reading John Maxwell, and he defines leadership is influence.
Sure.
All right. And YouVersion, you guys co-founding this, have a ton of influence in this market. And so how are you using that to lead your organization and also the relationships that externally outside of YouVersion?
Yeah, so it actually took a couple years before we really even dedicated complete team members to YouVersion. So there were still multiple roles within the organization, and that's just kind of part of our philosophy of trying to, be lean, try and be good stewards with resources. And so it took a couple years until we had dedicated resources to it. Today, with over 100 million, it's still a really small team. And so the team that's focused completely on YouVersion is 26 team members. With a couple open head count, so 28, 29 that lead that team. We have a director of that kind of runs the day-to-day operations, and Bobby and I still speak directly into kind of the vision and the direction and where that's going, is what that looks like today from a kind of an operations standpoint and from a team standpoint. It's a distributed team, and so about 60% of that is locally there in the Oklahoma City area, kind of the core leadership core of the team and the senior devs, but we do have remote team members that are also a part of the team, and what we get to benefit from, being a Bible app and connected to a church and connected to that type cause, is that we're able to execute that because of the volunteers that actually help us accomplish what we do, kind of the Wikipedia model, if you will, of how many people they're able to empower and use. And so we have right at 500 volunteers that are actively engaged in helping translate the interfaces to other languages, helping user support, and so we fully support, technically support the app in about 14 languages, if you will. We translate all of the app stores into all of those languages as well, and that's all volunteer led. And so that's kind of how we're able to scale, if you will, is not from a staffing standpoint. It's more from the ability to leverage passionate people all over the world to join the vision and engage in what we're doing with their time.
Yeah, so when Terry describes that, there's many people that when they download the Bible app, they know it as La Biblia or as something else in their language. Every piece of communication that they receive comes to them in that language. Tech support's in that language. So when he says 14, it's not, hey, we went and kicked it into Google Translate and it kicked out 14 languages. It's actually teams of people that are treating it and trying to make sure it's designed in a way that works in those languages. We have Bibles. We've had to learn a lot because one thing we didn't, you might be able to tell if you had enough time to get to know us really well, that we really have no idea what we were doing. We didn't when we started. We didn't even know the Bible was owned by people. That's kind of the type of ignorance that we brought into this. But and we're in Oklahoma, not necessarily the startup hotbed of the country in terms of talent, technology, all those things. But I think all of that is, we know it to be something, we really feel like it's something that God's doing that's much greater than us. We know that there's no way that our inputs sort of equal the output that we see coming from it. And so when you talk about the responsibility that the influence or the responsibility that we have, it's something that the phrase that I like to use is that we don't we don't take it lightly, but we also don't hold it tightly because we don't really see it as ours. We see it as something we're sort of entrusted to be responsible for. And that comes also with the resources that people invest. So we're, like Terry mentioned, we're part of a church. I mean, it's not even a separate entity. It's just part of that nonprofit, that church. And we're funded, and those 26 headcount that he mentioned are funded through partly by the church and through donors. And so I've done startups before, for-profit, and sold companies before I went to work at the church about 12 years ago. And when we were using dial-up 12 years ago when I went to work there. But what we're doing here is not, how much can we raise, how fast can we, it's a different kind of culture. We're focused on how do we manage treat this, grow fast, but do it in a way that's really responsible economically and sustainable. Because we're looking at this sort of in a much longer run than kind of here and now and an exit. It's not going to kind of work that way. For us, 100 million, we would never have had any earthly idea on that Thursday afternoon that we'd be anywhere remotely close to 100 million. We never thought 83,000 would be possible. And so it's totally blown us away. But each step along the way, you get the sense that, and maybe even the faith or the confidence that there could be so much more. So where we sit today, we actually feel like 100 million is really just the beginning, just kind of like the very start for it, that it actually could be billions of devices that have the Bible app, and people not just installing it on their phone, but really engaging on a daily basis. So that's really the vision of where it sits today. And but to get there, it's going to require us to, I think, be very responsible with the resources that we have to kind of design it that way.
Yeah, that's amazing. I mean, one of the things is when you're at that level of influence, right, you have 100 million downloads, so many ideas can creep up, right? A lot of people throw a bunch of ideas at you guys in terms of how do you, not pivot, but how do you go into other markets with that? How do you guys decide as a leadership team where to focus? All right, it's almost like that book called Focus on One Thing. What is the one thing you guys focus on over at YouVersion, and how you filter out the noise? Yeah,
it's a great question with probably not a simple answer, because there's a lot of ideas. And it's a big market. There's a lot of things that we want to accomplish in that. But we do very similar to what Victor talked about. I mean, we have a mission. We understand what we're trying to do. Our mission is Bible engagement, getting people to get back to reading, to try and do what the studies show that they want to do, but they don't really know how to because it's a bit complex. And so we filter how Bobby was kind of talking a little bit about his ideas and processing and filtering his ideas. We run all of those ideas kind of up against that simple vision, that simple mission, and what we're trying to do, and that kind of guides us towards saying no to a lot of those ideas and tweaking and honing what we're already doing and staying a little bit more focused on the long tail of what the long-term vision is. But crafting and what I spend a lot of my time with the team is preparing the team and setting the team up to respond to those momentum opportunities. And so we've seen too many times of where focused on a long-term vision that makes it too slow to respond to market opportunities in front of you and little adjustments that you want to do. And so kind of honing those together, staying focused and letting the vision drive what we're doing and saying no to the things that'll pull us off of that, but actually saying yes to the ones that are going to make those significant changes and those significant differences to kind of keep us on path. And so
an example of that real quick from this last year or this year was the Bible series, which was, some of you may have heard of, is on the History Channel. It was a show that was produced by Mark Burnett, who does Survivor, The Voice, The Apprentice, all these reality shows actually, but it's not a reality show, or it wasn't designed the same way. But he had a real passion to visually capture the Bible and do it at a high quality level. And so he put a lot of money into this show. Well, about 1 month before the launch of the show, I'd been developing a relationship with him through a variety of conversations and meetings, but literally 1 month before the show airs, he decides to kind of scrap the plan that they had for their app strategy and make us the official app of the show. But as part of that, and of course this idea, we had to do this was several months before, but his decision to do it was 1 month before. And as part of that, we needed to add an entire new feature to our app to include video, which was one of the things we planned to do, but in terms of priority, it would have come later absent this opportunity. So in 1 month, the team on multiple platforms had to get this, a small team, but had to get this feature in, and we had to develop a national TV commercial, which we'd never done before. We had no idea what we were doing, because as part of the show, we would have a commercial on it. But we knew that the opportunity was relatively big. So from that 1 month of that show, we saw, I think, 1.5 million new installs directly come from related to the television show and the commercial, and then of course all sorts of engagement with the video content. Yes, but the team pulled it off. But it was one of those, it could easily say, well, hey, here we are just running around without focus to do it. But we kind of knew how it contributed to the mission, but we wanted to be nimble enough that we had kind of a plan to be able to redirect that on short notice if we needed to because of that opportunity. And that was an example of one that we jumped on.
It is the perfect example of when Jerry said is that the NFL wasn't going to delay their launch. We knew exactly when that television show was going to launch, and so I completely related to that. Is that and we just knew, and the team was poised and excited, and they grabbed the vision, and that is what enabled us to execute. We look back now, and I mean, it shouldn't have happened. There's just no way that we should have been able to pull that off, but they did, and they got excited about it, and it was rallied around
awesome.
that.
Great. Now, you guys, we're about to get started some Q&A. So whoever has some questions, feel free to go to any of these two sides. Anybody have a question now?
You mentioned momentum, and I know with a lot of these startup businesses or developing what you did, it takes a lot of time and energy. How did you manage doing that without neglecting some of your other priorities, such as family and your faith?
I think one of the things that first of all, it's a great question. I think kind of keeping the balance, and I don't know if balance is even the right word, but kind of keeping those priorities where they are is, I think, a constant. For us, there are seasons where things are more intense than other seasons. But family has always been just a very, very high priority. So I have 4 children now. Our fourth, 3 months ago. And one example is I have been real consistent. I put a no-fly zone all the way around the birth of our child. Not like the day before, like I know some people have tried to do, but like literally a month before the baby's due, month and a half after. It's just a strict, I don't care what it is, what the opportunity is. There's no way that I'm flying. I'm going to be there, with my wife. But then right now, like this last couple of weeks is a different season, where there's a little more intensity of travel and being gone. Some of my responsibilities are to communicate with the media. When those types of opportunities, we've had a decent amount of press in the last couple of weeks but we knew it was coming. We kind of had a sense of it. But my wife, because of the time that I invested, for a few weeks, is very kind of considerate and understanding. Our children as well. But it's just a kind of a constant. In terms of, everything's just about intentionality. So you have to be very intentional about it. It's not going to come naturally, especially if you're wired like I am to be a workaholic. There's a real, some people carry that with some sort of badge of honor. It's really kind of a sickness where when you're doing a startup thing, you kind of think, well, hey, it all depends on me, so I've got to put like the 120-hour work weeks, that type of thing. And that's how I was wired. In fact, when I did startups, like for-profit startups, that's exactly what it looked like. I didn't have children, but I was married, and I would see my wife Saturday morning maybe for about 3 or 4 hours, and that was kind of the extent of our first married year of relationship, which was not a good strategy, not a good idea. somewhat obvious, but not so much when you feel like you have investors' money and you have other things, that you're dealing with and you feel responsible for it. So you take a workaholic and you give them a higher purpose, like trying to, help people engage in the Bible or just work at a church. And that's like a really bad cocktail to kind of throw together, is to sort of throw that in there and then like throw like some sort of, it's not investors, this is people's eternity you're dealing with. I mean, it's like you have this sense of, in some ways, almost, it can become a problem. So we, I'm kind of laughing, but it did become a problem. Let's put it that way. So some of my approach to it really comes from some negative aspects of my experience with it. Everyone handles it differently. I mean, Terry has different ways that he brings the bright boundaries in. So I'll let him maybe talk about what he does.
Yeah, I think it needs to look different for everybody and how everybody's wired, what everybody's situation looks like. But I echo off the word that you use as your priorities. You have to understand what they are. You have to realize that there's more than just what you're investing in from a work standpoint. And then for me, what's critically important is recognizing my weaknesses, and Bobby, what he's talking about, recognizing those. And what has been a huge part of just me growing as a leader is recognizing those weaknesses and surrounding myself with people that'll hold me accountable to that and speak into my life. And because there's a lot of times that I'll just get honed in and focused on whatever it is, and I might not even see it. And so having people around me that make me better and that will see that and call me out on it and do that, that's been a success point for me. And the other one is that I've just found myself is that I have to have other outlets because the energy's not going to stop. There's for a long time, and that's why I don't use balance anymore, is because balance doesn't work for me. I mean, it's just full on with whatever I do. So I just have to have other things that I can channel that towards. And that's become much more successful for me, because as I was just really trying to figure out how to turn it on, turn it off, and figure out this balance thing, I just failed at that over and over and over. And so I kind of redirected that towards where can I put my energy into, and that's kind of laid in those priorities of how can I invest that energy into my family, how can I invest that energy into other things that I get fulfillment out of, and those are things that are different than just what I get to do from a ministry or from a work standpoint.
And we would instill that with the team. I think it's like anything that would relate to a family priority or just anything resembling that, we would not just model, but we would strongly elevate that priority. Like, we wouldn't allow a team member to work if we knew that for example, their father was battling cancer and was just kind of, they were trying to struggle through it. We were like, go be with your dad. They just found this out and don't even think twice about it. It doesn't matter how much time it is, whatever time it takes. So I think there's been repeated kind of conversations where we try to make sure people know if they're struggling in their marriage or if they're dealing with a situation, we're absolutely, that's priority. And we, in fact, there's a couple times where I've had to make people go do that because they're like, no, I'm going to stay. I'm going to get this done. It's like, no, you lose your job if you stay. I mean, you've got to go. It's that serious. It's not an option. I mean,
it's very much part of the culture.
Yeah, it's part of the culture.
Very much a part of the culture.
That's awesome. Thanks for sharing that.
You mentioned that you got to know each other through entrepreneurial conferences and that kind of thing. How important is that for you and the creativity and being able to come up with the ideas and to make them work?
I think people learn in different ways and have different things that stimulate kind of creative ideas. I'm not lying that it really is like travel for me, like moving. It's not usually conferences that are the things that trigger ideas for me. So I think it's
getting to the conference.
Getting to the conference. Yeah, the conference itself is just a reason to travel so that I could think of ideas. Now, I learn a lot, and probably learn a lot about leadership and even management, as Chiwa was kind of, talking about the differences from leaders, some from conferences, a lot from talking, and like even Chiwa himself is a mentor for us, and so we'll learn a lot from. But in terms of like creativity, it could be things that I'm reading, things that I'm thinking about, things I see, but I would say in large part, I don't necessarily usually go to conferences to get new entrepreneurial ideas, or that isn't the trigger for me.
Yeah, I echo that as well too. I learn a little bit differently than in conferences. I do get some ideas about it. What I found that really helps me from a conference, and I think it's a little second part of your question there, is that from a networking and getting to know people, that's what I really value out of attending conferences and connecting with others, and then that's where those ideas come from. A lot more in just those individual relationships that typically play out to a lot more than just that 10 minutes sitting next to them, or an hour sitting next to them. Really connecting with those like-minded ones, and then bouncing ideas off of them, and that's been a big success for me.
Great. Got a question?
Yeah, I have a question. You guys mentioned that you have about 500 volunteers. A lot of times for entrepreneurs and business owners, they have employees that they're receiving wages and compensation for the company. But when it comes to managing volunteers, it's a whole other ball game. So I just was curious to know as to, how do you motivate or just inspire your volunteers? And this is probably a long-winded answer, but perhaps maybe a couple common practices or best practices would be good.
It is complex and complicated, and as we've grown and we've scaled, and the amount of them and the amount of information has had to create the systems. But something that Chihuahua mentioned really resonated with me, is that when the vision is so huge and the problem is so complex, that's what can attract people to it. And really at the heart from our volunteers, I would have to say it's as simple as that, is that the people that are helping us and that are a part of it really feel like entrepreneurs and owners, and we share that with them, and they own that area, as Victor mentioned as well too. They own that area, and we try and allow them to do that.
Give them stock options in our non-existent company.
Non-existent stock options in our nonprofit.
You own 100%.
100% of it, but it's the vision that they get connected to, and that's the passion that drives them, and that doesn't make it easy. I mean, our teams that lead the volunteers, work a lot, and it's really complex and it's challenging, and you got to navigate that. But it all gets boiled out of their passion. They're as excited about it as we are. We have, one of the guys that I'm thinking of right now, that's one of our answering support tickets. He's a police officer, and he's got his wireless device in his vehicle, and he's answering support tickets, in between calls, when he's excited about it, and he loves it. And he's on his phone, and he's responding to all of these tickets, and he's excited about it. I don't know that I'd want to live in his neighborhood, because he's not doing his other job, but I'm thankful.
Our taxes are paying for that volunteer, so
I'm thankful that he's serving doing that. But they're as excited and as passionate about it as we are, and so they don't need a lot of motivation. They're pretty motivated themselves.
I think a couple other practical things. One is that we don't lower expectations of what we're looking for out of people because they're volunteer. That volunteer doesn't mean that they're somehow dumber. They're actually really bright people, but sometimes people treat volunteers like they're not that capable, like they unintentionally, I think, kind of just say, well, we could have a volunteer do that. I'm not sure if that might be too hard for them to do. We might need to give that to somebody that's on team. We never want to lower expectations ever, for people, because these are oftentimes, like he said, police officers. They're successful people and their
They're
careers.
engineers on the BigQuery team.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we've got these really amazing, talented people. But the other thing practically we do is we actually go through. We have a person that's on our staff. They go through and review essentially applications from people that are volunteering to actually make sure that they're a fit for our team. It's not like, hey, you want to volunteer? No problem. Here you go. Here's where you volunteer. There's actually a process that we go through, just like you would, not quite as extensively as if you're hiring someone, obviously, but we want to make sure that one is that we have them engaged in the right place. two, that they're going to be capable of doing the job that we need them to do. And so, and we want to make sure that the expectations are clear and all of that. So that's a front side process.
A couple of our best staff members were volunteers and serving as volunteers that have joined our team and have become some of our best engineers.
And then we also want to do things that you would typically do for team members, which you want to make sure not only do they know about the vision, but we're reinforcing it. Our volunteers hear stories about how other lives have been changed as a result of the app or the things that they're doing. We like to make sure that stays in front of them. And one thing that kind of Terry was implying with what he's saying is most all of our volunteers, the reason that they're volunteering is that their life was somehow impacted by the app or by what we're doing. So they already, before they come, are bought in to the vision. It's not just some random person that wants to make a difference. It's actually someone that knows how this has helped them. So they're actually doing it out of a passion that they have because of how it's changed their life. That police officer, I don't know his particular or her particular story, but it's likely one that started with a download of this app. And
so why don't I interject there? I mean, we're about to wrap up Q&A, and along those lines, right? You guys have this big vision that a lot of people just want to be a part of, right? Whether they're volunteers or whether they're actual independent developers, right, with their apps. What is that filter? Because you guys have to do that, right? You guys are at a certain point, and to tell, okay, yes, we can work with you, or no, sorry, not now. Like, what does that look like from a leadership perspective?
I mean, it probably entirely depends on the person, entirely depends on the skill set, entirely depends on the time at which we are at that particular, like what we're looking for and needing. The practical process is we have a volunteer application form, and so we encourage people to kind of go start there, and then we have like I said, a person on our team that kind of goes through the Skype calls, conversations with all of those people that fill that application out to find out where they'd best be suited. And so it's like that's sort of where the filtering takes place. The specifics of what we're looking for would be very similar to what we're looking for in an employee in general in terms of the value qualities, from it. We're looking for passion. We're looking for someone that's teachable and wants to learn, all those factors. But in terms of practice, I don't know if your question is about the specific skill sets of what we're looking for, or if it's more just conceptual, but the specific skill sets really depend on what it is that we've got, going.
And then there's a vetting process, that we get so many people that, man, I want to volunteer for you for 40 hours a week or whatever. So there's a vetting process, just like, walking through that. But again, that's a great place where we find incredible talent, people that are passionate, lots of Googlers,
We would love any of you that want to volunteer to be a part of this. Yeah. It's amazing, and we've got a long ways to go to get to 1 billion. We're just at 100 million, so you could be a part of the ground floor of this.
Just another zero. Help us get another zero.
Help us add another zero on the end.
Just getting started.
We're just getting started.
So with that, what's next for YouVersion?
You could even show it. So there's a lot of what's coming next.
Two probably fairly exciting things, the bigger things that we're working on. One is the next version of the app that you'll see. I think there's a small update that's coming out here really soon. But after that, the big version that the team's been working on for some time is really moving the Bible app from a personal experience with the Bible to one that you can optionally choose to do with friends that you trust. So it becomes a very simple way to say it becomes a very focused kind of private social network around the Bible specifically, where right now we're seeing a need in the people that use the app to be able to have a conversation with people they trust, not just throw it out in the public space, which they do right now. And many people, like a couple 100,000 times a day, people are tweeting verses or posting passages to Facebook. But that isn't always conducive to really honest conversations about Scripture. And so we've got an entire kind of new concept of how to go about doing that that I think is going to be great. We're probably a couple months away from that being released, and I say that real hesitantly. I'm looking at Terry he's been on vacation for 17 days, so he needs to figure out where we're at on that. Is kind of what we're trying to figure out. So. And the other that we're excited about is actually Bible app for kids. Completely different
Totally
app.
different app, totally different experience.
Entirely different experience focused on children. It's one of the number one requests that we get. We have a lot of parents that use our app, and it's not designed to be an app that children use, but yet they want their children to engage in the Bible. So this concept is ground up, completely new concept, and it's really cool.
Highly interactive story, kind of gamification. Kids really getting immersive and engaging in, in a 3D, experience, and it is a totally different app. It'd be completely separate.
And that will launch in November.
Yes, we know that one for sure.
This year too.
Awesome.
Yep.
All right, great guys. Thanks for being here with us tonight.
Thank you.
Give these guys a hand. Thanks, guys. This way. Yeah. Thank you.
Thanks, Bobby and Terry, for coming out and speaking to us tonight. I want to take this time right now to actually, again, thank South Bay Church for hosting the ELEO conference. South Bay Church actually has an interesting entrepreneurial journey of its own. So this church is less than 5 years old, but already is averaging about 1,400 attendees every Sunday with 5 services each Sunday. And that didn't happen on its own. It took a lot of strategy and thought into that. So I want to invite actually Andy Wood to come up. He's the founder and lead pastor of this church. He's going to just briefly share a few words with us. So welcome, Andy.
Did you guys get some good nuggets of wisdom out of our time together today? Hey, can we thank one more time our speakers for being here with us and all of our volunteers as well? Today's event was run entirely by a team of volunteers, several of them that you've seen on stage tonight. So we're so grateful. One of the things I love about this event, there's tremendous diversity here. Some of you, you're just starting to dream that dream as an entrepreneur. Others of you, you're CEOs and you've been at this for a while, and then there's everything in between. And it's exciting to me to think about what can come as a result of our conversations and what happens tonight. And maybe even for some of you, this is your first time inside of a church building in your entire life, and you're thinking, why in the world would a church host an event on entrepreneurship and leadership? Let me tell you why this is so important for us. This is really connected to our vision. It goes way back to when I was in high school. I had an experience. I became a follower of Jesus. And after I did, I had this new joy, peace, and purpose that I had never experienced in my life. And I had all of these friends that I hung out with in high school. I played football. I wrestled. All these guys that I spent a lot of time with. And I started thinking about taking them to church with me. And I realized that the religious, traditional nature of church that I was experiencing didn't match up with what was going on in the inside of me. And I thought, if I take them to church, they're going to be more turned off, and they're not going to experience a life-giving relationship with God. And so I had an entrepreneurial experience, and I prayed a prayer. And I said, God, if you could ever use me to start a church for people like my friends, people who don't go to church, that's what I want to do with my life. And that was the beginning of a vision that has become a church now known as South Bay Church. And fast forward a few years, when my wife Stacy and I, we'd been married for 3 years, and we started thinking about where are we going to spend the rest of our lives. And we took out a whiteboard, we drew a map of the United States, and we said, which areas in the United States are most influential, that shape culture, the way that people think? We realized the Silicon Valley is at the top of that list, and we all agree on that, right? Just a few of you agree on that. But we realized what happens here literally changes the world. And since we moved here 5 years ago, we've just been blown away with the creativity, the innovation, the leadership of the Silicon Valley, of how what you guys do literally does influence and change the world. And you've even seen some of that tonight on stage. And what we want to do is we want to create an environment through our church and through what's happening with this ELEO group, the meetup group that you're going to hear about in just a second this fall, is we want to connect you to other people who have the same interests, the same passion that you do, and resource you to help you carry out that vision that's in your heart. And also, we want to let you know that we're here to serve you. We're here as a church to serve you both organizationally and to serve you individually. And if there's ever anything that we can do to help you in your journey, we want to be the place that you think of to give you the tools to go forward personally relationally and organizationally. So thank you guys so much for being here today with us. You're going to get some tools and a bag on your way out. It will highlight in a card about South Bay Church. We're here every single Sunday. We'd love to have you join us, but most importantly, we want to help you and resource you and let you know that we're here to serve you. So thanks for being here. Hope you got some good stuff out of tonight.